Well, thank you, Hannah, for setting this up, and thank you all for joining us. We are really happy that we could get such a good group together. We have over 75 of you in attendance, and we know how difficult this time is, especially for the ranchers and farmers in Utah. And I think I can speak for everybody on the panel today that we really wanted to get some time with you to talk to you about the programs that do exist and the programs that are being contemplated, and also hear from you in terms of the problems and questions that you have about the programs that are being rolled out to help the ranchers and farmers in Utah. My name is David Karlbach. I am with the World Trade Center of Utah. And in normal times, we help promote the state's business internationally. We help with international sales and trading. We have grant program for many small businesses and ranchers and farmers as well to help them develop international business. We lead trade missions and trade shows, and we have a set of services, trade services and investment services, basically one-on-one counseling and matching that we can help small businesses with to do more business internationally. That's in normal times. At this point in time, we've been very active helping with the state's economic recovery task force, and in particular focused on how to ensure that all of the businesses in Utah, including the ranchers and farmers, make full use of the federal programs that are being made available. And in that capacity, we are leading on something called the Rapid Response Task Force, which is a service where we can help individuals with their questions about these programs. And this webinar is part of that effort to get the information out into the hands of the small businesses, ranchers, and farmers. If after this call you do want more information, I encourage you to go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business, coronavirus.utah.gov/business. There's a lot of information online, and there's also the ability to make an inquiry to get someone to call you back and talk to you directly about questions that you might have. So that's the setup for, or the background, I should say. For today, we have a great panel. We have assembled a panel of leaders on some of the bigger programs, as well as representatives from Senator Romney's office and Senator Lee's office. Again, we'd like to both hear from you as well as answer your questions. Hopefully it'll be informative. We're gonna have prepared remarks from 4 different speakers, and then we're gonna open it up for Q&A, and hopefully we can get to many of your questions today and give you helpful answers. We're gonna start with the first speaker is gonna be Scott Albrecht from the West Utah Director for Senator Romney's office. We're then gonna hear from Heath Hanson, who is with the Southern Utah Area Director for Mike Lee's office. We're then going to hear from the SBA of Utah, including Marla Trollan, the District Director, and John Geige, the District Counsel for Utah and Montana for the SBA. And then finally, we're going to hear briefly from Randy Parker, who is the State Director of the USDA Rural Development Program in Utah. And then we'll do Q&A. To do Q&A, I think you can share your questions via the Q&A button on Zoom. Hopefully you know how to do that. And we look forward to your questions. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Scott to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Hope everyone's doing well during this crazy time. I know Senator Romney has been working very hard to do everything that they can in the Senate to give some relief to businesses. Most of you are probably aware of the PPP program that's the Senate passed. It's currently out of money. They lent around $350 billion that went towards payroll. And so it was a very successful program. It helped 15 million Americans stay on payroll. So we're happy with that. We know that the program wasn't perfect. It had about 2 weeks to figure out how they're going to get $2.2 trillion out. And so we really want to give a shout out to the SBA for being able to get those funds out just as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible to as many businesses as we can. But as mentioned, that money has ran out. And so the Senate is currently considering replenishing the PPP program with, right now it's still being negotiated, but anywhere between $300 and $400 billion to replenish that program. There's a good chance that it will pass within the next couple of days in the Senate, and then it'll obviously have to go to the House to get final approval as well. Right now, as the Senate, they have to get unanimous consent to pass the bill, so most likely there won't be a lot of statutory changes to the PPP program. It'll operate much like it had before, with the exception that they're trying to figure out a way to cut out funding that'll go specifically to local lenders and community banks that serve smaller or more vulnerable businesses to make sure they get the funding. A big portion of the funding in the first round was lent by huge banks, and that's fine. We don't mind doing that. We want to make sure that the smaller businesses, the more vulnerable businesses, are getting a chance to get that funding as well. So in this next round of funding, they're trying to carve that out, which I hope would help many of our farmers and ranchers around the country and specifically in the state of Utah. So that's pretty much just what I wanted to share, that they're going to hopefully replenish that within the next couple of days, and to just be aware of that and be ready to apply for that PPP program just as soon as you can. So with that, we'll take any questions or feedback that you have. Be happy to share my contact information with David, and he can push it out to the group as well. So thank you, and look forward to hearing from you.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. And now would like Heath, if you could say a few words.
Yeah, so as David said, my name is Heath Hanson. I'm Senator Mike Lee's Southern Utah Director. I'm based in St. George. It's good to join you today. Like Scott said, I hope everybody's doing as well as you possibly can in these times. Just to add on to what Scott said, the Paycheck Protection Program, they were hoping to come to a deal today, but it sounds like that won't happen. The Senate will be back in session tomorrow. They weren't supposed to be back in session until Thursday, but it sounds like they're hopeful a deal will come together and they can pass something tomorrow, so we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Also just wanted to make you aware of funds that the USDA made available last Friday. Just some of the money that they received from the CARES Act. They finally released a plan for what they're going to do with $19 billion. So it'll be about $16 billion that will be directed directly to agricultural producers in the form of just direct payments, very similar to the market facilitation program that the Trump administration set up. And then the remaining $3 billion will be spent by the federal government to purchase agricultural commodities like beef and pork, dairy, all sorts of other agricultural commodities. So if you need more information on that program, we're continuing to get information on how that's going to work. But if you'd like more, if you have any questions about it, we're happy to talk to anybody afterwards. I can get my contact information out to whoever does not have it. They're hoping to have those checks out to farmers before the end of May. So it'll take a little while, but they're hoping end of May will be the target for that. I also just wanted to make everyone aware that Senator Lee was appointed to President Trump's Opening Up America Again congressional group. The president's just looking for advice and assistance as he goes about supporting state and local governments and getting their economies reopened. I know that as I've talked to many of you in the ag community, you're appreciative of the assistance that the government has made available, but ultimately you just really want the markets to get open back up so you can continue going about your business. And that's the main goal of this congressional group. So Senator Lee would really like to hear from you all, from Utahns, how he can best serve on this congressional group and advise the president. And so he set up a site on his webpage at lee.senate.gov. If you go to there's a Utah First tab in the top right corner of Senator Lee's website. And if you just scroll your mouse over to that, there's a link that says Economic Recovery Submissions. Senator Lee would love to hear your feedback, questions, concerns, ideas for getting the economy open back up. So with that, any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you very much, Heath. All right. I think we'll have a slightly longer set of prepared remarks from Marla and John from the SBA, and we have a PowerPoint presentation as well that's on the screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Marla and John, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, David, and thanks for inviting us to be on the call this afternoon. You know, we really appreciate the opportunity to reach out to this community. So I'm going to just jump right into the Paycheck Protection Program. You all know about the CARES Act. So again, as Scott had said earlier, we anticipate more funding is going to be coming this week, hopefully, and really want and encourage you guys to put your applications in as soon as possible, and maybe even start pulling together your documentation and your application. We do have fillable forms that we can send to you, so just reach out to us. So the PPP program of the SBA is 100% guaranteed SBA loan. It's administered by lenders throughout our state, and those lenders have to be working with SBA directly. So we had a number of lenders initially that we already had worked with, about 70 of them, and we're up over 200 now. So we've had a lot of other lenders step up and want to participate with this program. The loan proceeds can be used for payroll costs. Obviously, it's intended to pay salaries and wages during an 8-week period of time. It can cover vacation, sick leave, severance, healthcare benefits, retirement benefits. The salaries of employees should be $100,000 or less per employee. That's what it's capped at. But you can also use this funding for mortgage interest payments, rent and utilities, interest on pre-existing debt, and that kind of thing. It can also be used to refinance economic injury disaster loan if you have one. So it can be used for a number of things, but it's primarily meant for payroll and should really be 75% used for payroll. Next slide, please. Okay, eligible entities. As you can see here, you guys would qualify, ranchers and farmers across the state of Utah. Also tribal businesses, small businesses, nonprofits, 501c3s, veterans organizations, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals also qualify. And the size standards for these, again, is 500 employees or less. I know you guys have all heard about that, but it's also based on your NAICS code or whatever industry you're in. And we can address questions on that. Next slide, please. So businesses with multiple locations can also qualify, as well as hotels, restaurants, et cetera. Ineligible entities would be small business types listed in the 13 CFR 120, and John can speak to that directly. He is our district counsel here on staff. Also, ineligible entities would include small businesses, of course, engaged in illegal activity or may have legal issues, and then business owners that have caused prior loss to the federal government, i.e. you might have an prior SBA loan that you're delinquent on, or that kind of thing. Next slide, please. So the loan terms are based on a formula. It's equal to or lesser of 2.5 times the applicant's average monthly payroll costs over 12 months. And the cap on these loans is $10 million. And the business, if businesses have been in operation for less than a year, then you have to use the average payroll cost for January and February of this year. The maturity of this is only 2 years, but the interest rate is really, really low. It's only at 0.5%. 1%. Oh, 1%. Sorry about that. I think it's wrong on the slide. Yep. Sorry. The complete payment deferment is for the first 6 to 12 months. And next slide, please. For those folks that may have an economic injury disaster loan, and it probably wouldn't pertain to you guys because typically you would not qualify unless you're an agricultural co-op for the EIDL loan. But anyway, you can roll in your EIDL loan into the PPP loan. Delegated authority for evaluation of eligibility. The applicant must be in operation on or before February 15th. Again, that's important to keep in mind. And then again, it's used for salaries and payroll purposes, primarily in taxes. The reimbursement for lenders, this doesn't really apply to you, so I won't necessarily touch on that, but you can read it. Next slide, please. Waivers. So we are applying a lot of waivers for the PPP, including we're waiving the guarantee fee and the annual lender fee, the credit elsewhere requirement, which is different than any of our other 7A loans that we disperse. We are also waiving collateral and personal guarantee requirements and prepayment penalties. Again, this loan is 100% backed by SBA. Next slide, please. So forgiveness. This is an important part of the PPP. You guys are probably fairly aware of it, but I'm going to run through it real quick. So the borrower may seek loan forgiveness spent on payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, utilities for the 8 weeks after the loan is obtained. And the payroll costs must be, like I said earlier, 75% of the requested forgiveness amount. So again, if you're looking to get, you know, the loan forgiven, then 75% of it must be for payroll. And these are just some examples. If the business reduces its number of compensation of employees during the 8-week period, the amount of forgiveness will be reduced. And then employers that restore their employment numbers and salaries by June 30th of this year would experience no reduction in forgiveness. And again, it applies to reductions from February 15th through April 26th. The borrower can apply for forgiveness, must supply documentation to the lender, including payroll tax filings, state filings, verification of mortgage and utility payments, and a certificate from a representative. Again, your lender can walk you through those specific documents if needed. And then the lender has 60 days to issue the decision on forgiveness. I'm going to just spend, and again, so you all qualify for the PPP program. Again, we really encourage you to work with your lenders, and we can supply a list of lenders to all of you that are working with us on this particular program for when the funding does come available again. But I quickly want to walk through the economic injury disaster loans because, like I said, this does include agricultural co-ops. It does not include individual ranchers and farmers, however, so just keep that in mind. The eligible folks include small businesses, private nonprofit organizations, independently owned and operated. The loan terms go up to $2 million instead of the $10 million under the PPP. The interest rate is higher though. It's 3.75 for small businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits, and the maturity is up to 30 years. So again, that's different than the 2 years maturity on the PPP. The proceeds for the EIDL, what we call EIDL, is used for fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, but it can't be used to refinance other long-term debt. This particular loan also has different requirements than the PPP, where they are going to look at credit elsewhere. So if you do have credit elsewhere, that's going to be taken into account for this loan versus the PPP where it doesn't apply. You have to have an acceptable credit history. You have to be able to show that you can make the payments. And then all loans over $25,000 must be secured with available collateral. There's no cost to apply for these loans. Oh, next slide, please. No cost to apply for these loans. Sorry, yeah, I'm already ahead of you. One more. There we go. So there's no cost to apply, no obligation to take the loan if it's offered. I know there is a significant lag time in getting the funding through EIDL right now. They are still processing all those applications that were submitted up until the point that the funding will run out. So what they have done, and again, these loans are administered by SBA, by the Office of Disaster Assistance. What they have done is they've temporarily closed down the portal because they know that they've already got so many applications in the queue that they're going to use up the funding that's available. But when hopefully when Congress passes this upcoming legislation, it will also include money for the EIDL program as well as the emergency grant. And probably most of you have heard about the emergency grant. That money goes up to $10,000, $1,000 per employee. So that money is intended to get out to small business owners as quickly as possible. And the funding for the EIDL will include the emergency grant funding as well, I believe, that Congress is considering. So just wanted to let folks know, though, that SBA has worked on a new process that includes a two-tier call system for basic inquiries as well as technical inquiries. They've also implemented an independent mortgage company to process loans much, much quicker. So hopefully we can get that funding out the door faster. And I think that's it. Those are really the programs that we have available. Again, the main one that I think pertains to all of you is the PPP program. So, and John is already answering questions in the chat if you have any questions for him directly. Can you go one more slide toward the last slide? I think it's the contact information that we have, please. Yeah, there you go. So if you need to get a hold of us, don't hesitate. You can call us at that 801-524-3209. You can email us at utahgeneral@sba.gov. And then we included the Office of Disaster Assistance information as well. Just a shout out to David and Miles and Jim and all those folks at the World Trade Center for helping us get that rapid response team up and running. They have been a significant help to us. They've had over 1,500 inquiries coming their way. And you can also reach out to them as well. And I think John's going to put that in the chat too, or he already did. Okay.
Wonderful.
All right. So with that, pass it back to Dave.
Yes, thank you very much. And we're going to get to Q&A here just in 1 second. We have one more speaker with just a few thoughts to share. Randy from the USDA Rural Development Office here in Utah. Could you share a few thoughts?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, David?
Yeah, you're loud.
Okay, terrific. It's good to be here, and I would to echo the thanks to the World Trade Center for this outreach that we're doing with the important group of farmers and ranchers around the state of Utah. In fact, the reason I'm a part of this is we're very concerned about the farmers and ranchers around the state, and our involvement is more with the rural communities that they do support. And a lot of what's going on through USDA rural development right now is related to deferrals and forbearance, especially with our single family housing, our multifamily housing, our community programs like communities that have finance, sewer and water and other infrastructure through us, our business and cooperatives. If you have direct loans with us, we have the ability to provide forbearance or deferrals on that. And if you're working with one of the lenders that we partner with, similarly, we will work with that private lender on deferrals. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of websites. They're easy to get to, and they will give you the most up-to-date information that's available from a USDA-wide standpoint. It's usda.gov/coronavirus. That will give you across-the-board program information, similar to what Heath mentioned, what's coming out that's directed to farmers and ranchers. That would be available on that website. If you're looking specifically at what we do at USDA Rural Development, that website is rd.usda.gov www.usda.gov/coronavirus. We have a great partnership here in Utah and across the country between rural development and SBA in helping our rural communities. And I think we really do communicate and work well together, Marla, and that's appreciated. We have 8 rural development offices scattered around the state that we can help deliver services from USDA, as well as partnering with SBA to help get the services out there that are needed. There's a couple of things I'm going to just note that we're really focused on, and that's rural communications. Like our Reconnect program, we got $100 million of additional broadband money to invest in rural communities. That is entirely grant money out of the CARES Act. We also have money available in distance learning and our telemedicine program to help connect rural Utah to their doctors and their educational facility or institutions. And so that's the main things I wanted to note. And then I had a question for Heath. The 16 million that you mentioned earlier for ag producers that came into the picture last Friday, will that be something that FSA will be involved with, the Farm Services Agency?
I'm not sure. I can get back to you on that.
I think that's something for our farmers and ranchers to understand where that money is going to be made available. I had not heard of that was available, and it seems to me that our Farm Services Agency would likely be the outreach mechanism, because they had the farm service centers scattered across the state. So that would make sense, but I know that they would be interested in that either.
Okay, I'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay. And that's it from my end, David.
Okay, thank you for the overview, Randy. I think at this point we want to open it up to Q&A or chat, and share with the whole audience here some of the discussions going on there, and some other answers that the panel may have. Hannah, do you want to moderate that and tee up the first question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So our first question would be, are there any restrictions for farmers and ranchers with the PPP program that would prevent them from being approved?
I think Marla or John?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, no restrictions that we can think of except for perhaps size standards. So they do still have to qualify under our small business standards, but our standards are pretty high. And as we indicated before, there's 3 different ways you can calculate those size standards, and you can use the larger of those 3.
Perfect. Another question, if I applied for the PPP loan and was approved and signed the loan papers but did not receive the money before they ran out, do I need to reapply, or is my original approval still active?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, what I would suggest is you go back and check with the lender specifically. I think in most cases, the lenders are probably going to keep those applications in the queue, but you just want to be 100% certain. So just reach back out to your lender and ensure that your application is still in there.
Perfect. Now, it looks like this was answered in the chat, but just if you want to explain it a little further, what if an employer has some employees who are making more than $100,000 per year?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so you just can't count the amounts that are above 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you can't count the employee at all. You can count up to $100,000 of their compensation.
Right, it's just capped at that.
Yeah, so when you're calculating your 2.5 times payroll costs, you can include up to $100,000 for each employee.
Perfect. A question that just came in, is there any way they will open up new idle funds to be available to farmers and ranchers?
Yeah, and I guess, Scott, you addressed this earlier, I believe, when you mentioned there might be more money coming to idle. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I don't know exactly what it's going to be as they're still negotiating it. Right now, I'm just being told that it's mainly refunding for PPP. So I'll double check on the idle and get that information
Yeah.
back to Marla, and then she can disperse it.
Yeah, and I think what I read anyway is that I think it's 60 or 80 billion to more going to idle, but again, we'll have to see how that pans out.
And in addition to them considering more funding, they're also considering tweaks to some of the underlying policies of how these programs work. So we'll have to see how that shakes out to see if they loosen up, for example, on the idle side to allow farmers and ranchers and other agricultural related businesses. We don't know yet.
Great. This question is, what about funding to improve cell service in rural areas? Do you guys know an answer to that?
Say that again, self-service?
Are you talking about contractors or independent business owners?
I didn't specify.
It sounds like Jay's looking at cell towers for cell telephones is what I'm guessing, Jay. And we work with providers through USDA Rural Development that are providing service to rural, particularly from a broadband standpoint. But some of those same providers are providing cell service as well. That may be something that you could ask your provider to see if they have the ability to extend more into that West Box Elder County area.
Great. The last question that just came in, lenders were instructed to use the borrower's Schedule C to calculate loan amounts for self-employed and individual contractors. Would we be able to use a Schedule F instead to calculate the loan amount?
Yes, we've been told that for agriculture-related businesses and farms, you would be able to use the Schedule F. I think it's line 34, not exactly sure about that. Whereas just normal self-employed would use line 31 on Schedule C.
Great. Does any of this money go towards loans for sprinkler systems? Applications are submitted, but money has not been approved.
Are you asking maybe under the SBA programs if funds could be used for sprinkler systems?
I'm assuming so.
Yeah, I don't think that would be an allowable. It's mainly for payroll costs, rents, utilities, and to refinance an idle loan that was obtained earlier in the year.
Hey,
But what
John,
I would,
But yeah.
I was just gonna say, could you comment, could an idle loan be used for a sprinkler system?
well, keep in mind that ranchers and farmers can't apply for idle right now. It has to be agricultural co-ops.
I see.
So they can apply for the PPP. And you know, what I'm recommending is that people go ahead and submit their applications for the PPP. And again, if you're primarily using it for payroll costs, you're likely going to get approved. And, you know, if a sprinkler system is part of it depends on how much you're looking at, but I think John would agree with this to just go ahead and submit their application.
Or if you've taken out a debt to,
right,
then you can pay regular payments as they come due for those fixed debts. That can be included in
Right.
PPP loans.
Great. Someone said they applied for an assistance grant 4 weeks ago through the portal, but haven't heard anything back. What should they do to follow up?
is that the idle that they're referring to? I assume it is. So again, like I said, the ODA, Office of Disaster Assistance, is really, really backlogged with hundreds of thousands of applications that they're processing and getting the funding out as quickly as possible. But because they're over inundated, that funding is not coming very quickly. If you had submitted your application before they closed down the portal, which I'm assuming was the case with this person, then your application is still in the queue and it's still going to be processed. Now, you know, they're going to continue to process those applications until the funds run out. So if Congress doesn't pass, the portion of funding to give to EIDL, then, they're just going to exhaust the money that they do have, and it's first come, first serve. So I can't guarantee that everybody's going to get the funding that they requested. It just really depends on how much is left.
Great. And someone asked, what role does the $10,000 advance on EIDL loans play? Is the advance forgiven or forgivable? And what will be the underwriting standards prior to making the advance? Yeah,
so the advance goes up to $10,000, and it's $1,000 per employee. So if you only have 4 employees, you're only going to get up to $4,000. And basically, the idea behind that is to give you funding more quickly. So, I think they're trying to turn this money around as quickly as possible. Originally, I think it was 3 to 5 days. I think it's probably taken a little bit longer than that, given the volume of applications they're processing. But keep in mind that if you did not go into the new portal that they had set up, I think probably a couple weeks ago
March
or so.
29th.
March 29th. Yeah, if you applied before March 29th and didn't go into the new portal to click the button for the emergency grant, then you may not get the emergency grant. So what they were telling folks to do is, even if you submitted an application before the end of March, you should go back into the new portal, reapply through this streamlined application process, click the button for the emergency grant, and then you will stay in the queue based on your first application that was submitted. But that way you'll get your money quicker, and you'll be eligible potentially for the emergency grant.
And also to answer the other part of the question, I don't believe there really is any underwriting that goes in before approving that $10,000. There might be an eligibility determination just to see if you're eligible overall, but no underwriting.
Great. And a follow-up question to that, is the $10,000 a grant or a loan?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's forgivable.
It is a grant.
Yeah, it's a grant.
Doesn't have to be repaid, even if you're not approved for the ultimate loan itself.
Correct.
Perfect.
But it will be subtracted by, ultimately, if you apply for a PPP loan later, it will be subtracted from that one.
Okay. If your loan application is sitting in pending with the SBA, what do we need to reapply or resubmit?
No, you don't. You'll stay in the queue.
Perfect. That's all the questions that I'm seeing for right now. Thank you guys so much for participating in this. Oh, we just got one more question. Are irrigation companies eligible for the EIDL loans? And these companies would be the shareholder companies that distribute irrigation water.
Okay. I don't know if it's a nonprofit type organization or what.
CoOp.
If it is a nonprofit and it's a private, it sounds like it's a membership-based thing, ownership type arrangement, then yes, I would say it's probably eligible. If it's not a nonprofit, I don't know if it would. I doubt it's an agricultural co-op type organization either. So.
It's a non-profit private company.
Okay, yeah.
So would they?
So yeah, I would think they would probably be eligible, given what you've told me.
Perfect. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. To all the participants who have joined in, please fill out the survey that should pop up after you end the call. Scott, Heath, John, Marla, Randy, David, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so